I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would come from the people who raised me. I was 26 when my parents called me into their office, the one I had practically lived in since I was old enough to hold a pen and file paperwork. Our family ran a mid-sized catering and events business that had grown steadily over 2 decades. Everyone in our small town knew our company. Our trucks were parked outside almost every wedding, graduation, or corporate event. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And more importantly, it was supposed to be my future. I had put in everything. Nights when my friends were out at bars, I was polishing silverware for a 200-guest banquet. Summers when others traveled, I was stuck sweating in a hot kitchen, prepping trays of food. I learned the business inside and inventory marketing, logistics, staff management. It wasn't just a job, it was my whole identity. I thought one day I'd inherit the company. That was always the unspoken promise. So when my parents sat me down and told me they were letting me go, I thought it was a joke. They told me it wasn't too personal, just financial, that the company needed to tighten the budget. I sat there stunned, trying to process the words fired by my own parents. After giving up years of my life to keep things running smoothly, the part that burned most, my younger brother, Matt, still had a job there. Matt was 24 at the time, and while I had been the one holding the place together, he was the golden child. The one who could mess up orders, skip shifts, flirt with the staff instead of working, and somehow never face consequences. I loved my brother, but I hated how blind my parents were to his flaws. When I asked why I was the one being cut instead of him, my father simply said, "Matt has more potential to bring in future clients. You're replaceable." That word replaceable echoed in my head for months. They didn't offer me severance. Didn't he offer to help me land on my feet? Just a cold corporate-style firing. Except this wasn't some boss I could resent and leave behind. These were the two people who were supposed to protect me. I packed up my few personal items from the office. That day, my coffee mug, my binder of ideas for expanding our services, a framed photo of me with the staff after a huge wedding we'd pulled off. I walked out of the building that had been my second home since childhood, and no one stopped me. For the first few months, I spiraled. My resume was full of family business experience at hiring managers barely respected. Employers wanted flashy internships or corporate references, not help my parents keep a catering company alive. I worked odd jobs, bartending, delivery driving, even a stint at a call center just to pay rent. Every rejection letter felt like another reminder that my own parents had tossed me aside like garbage. And the worst part, my parents didn't call. Not once. Not to check in. Not to see if I was okay, not even on my birthday. It was like I had died to them the moment I stopped being useful. But here is the twist 3 years later. They did call. And the only reason was because their beloved golden child had run their once thriving business into the ground. Doc, if you've ever had the rug pulled out from under you, you'll understand what those next few years felt like. I wasn't just unemployed, I was humiliated. Every time I bumped into someone from town, they'd ask, "Hey, how is the family business?" And I'd have to fake a smile and say, "Oh, I'm not with them anymore." People would tilt their heads with pity or confusion, like they couldn't understand why the kid who'd been running around in the company polo since age 12 wasn't there anymore. Some didn't believe me when I said I'd been fired. Who gets fired from their own family's business? I felt bitter, angry, but mostly I felt lost. My identity had been wrapped around that company. Without it, I didn't know who I was. Money was tight. Rent was late more times than I care to admit. I ate more instant noodles in those years than any grown adult should. My car broke down twice, and both times I had to beg friends to spot me the cash to fix it. My parents silent. They didn't even offer me leftovers from events anymore. The only person who stuck by me was my best friend Kyle. He was the one who convinced me to stop wallowing and start applying outside my comfort zone. He reminded me that my skills budgeting, event planning, people management were real, even if corporate HR people didn't understand. Slowly, I started piecing together part-time work with small event companies, then landed a steady gig with a local hotel that hosted conferences. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time, I felt like I was being judged on my actual performance, not compared to my brother. Meanwhile, Matt was thriving. At least according to Facebook. My feed was full of him posing at events with his arm around brides, clinking glasses with groomsmen, or showing off big corporate partnerships my parents proudly shared. But every so often, I'd hear whispers. Former coworkers reaching out to me, asking if it was true the company was cutting corners. A vendor complaining about late payments. A friend telling me they'd been hired for an event, only for my brother to forget to confirm the details. At first, I brushed it off as gossip. But then I got a call that made my blood run cold. One of the chefs I used to work closely with, someone I trusted, reached out. He told me he'd quit after my brother yelled at him in front of clients. The new hires were inexperienced and underpaid. Longtime staff were leaving in droves. Events were running late, food quality was slipping, and word was spreading fast. He ended his call with something I'll never forget. "This place isn't what it used to be when you were here. It's falling apart." I laughed at first, a bitter, almost manic laugh. Wasn't he this exactly what I had predicted? My parents chose my brother because they thought he had potential. Meanwhile, I was replaceable. Well, how was that potential working out for them now? I tried to push it out of my mind. It wasn't he my problem anymore. I had finally started building a life outside their shadow. But late at night, I couldn't help but imagine the business collapsing. The company I had poured sweat and blood into might go under, and even though I had every reason to hate them, the thought made me sick to my stomach. Still, I figured they'd never admit it. My parents were too proud. They'd rather run the ship into the iceberg than admit they'd made the wrong choice. So when my phone buzzed one random Thursday afternoon and I saw my mom's name pop up on the screen, for the first time in almost 3 years, I froze. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let it ring out. But curiosity got the better of me. And when I picked up, the first words out of her mouth, "How are you?" or "We miss you." They were, "We need your help." Hearing my mother's voice after nearly 3 years of silence was like reopening an old wound I'd almost convinced myself had scarred over. Her tone was different. Not the confident, commanding woman who used to bark orders in the kitchen. Not the meticulous bookkeeper who kept spreadsheets tighter than Fort Knox. She sounded fragile, almost desperate. "We need your help," she said again. Like if she repeated it, I'd leap at the chance to save them. I sat there in stunned silence, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I could feel a laugh bubbling in my throat, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that comes from humor. It was the kind that tastes like bitterness. "Help," I finally managed. "You mean the kind of help I gave for over a decade? For free, the kind of help you tossed aside like it meant nothing." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "We made mistakes. But things are bad, honey. Really bad. Clients are pulling out, staff are quitting, and your father and I can't keep up. We thought Matt. Of course you thought Matt. I cut in sharply. Matt the golden boy. Matt who never showed up on time. Matt who couldn't even organize a sandwich order, let alone a wedding for 200 people. Her voice wavered. Yes, overwhelmed. I almost lost it right there. Overwhelmed. I'd been drowning for years in that business, and they never noticed. I kept everything together so Matt could coast. And now that the weight had finally crushed him, suddenly I was supposed to swoop in like their safety net. Why are you calling me now? I asked, my voice shaking. Why now, after 3 years of silence? That's when my dad got on the line. His voice was firmer, but I could still hear the cracks. Because you're the only one who knows how to fix this. We need you back just for a while. Help us stabilize things, get clients back. Maybe train new staff. We'll even put you on payroll this time. Payroll, that word hit me like a slap. 3 years ago, they couldn't afford to pay me. 3 years ago, I was replaceable. And now suddenly, I was worth a paycheck. Because their empire was burning to the ground. I asked, what about Matt? He's supposed to be the future of the company. There was silence. Then my dad muttered something I never thought I'd hear him say. For a split second, I felt a flicker of vindication. The golden child had failed. The truth was finally undeniable. But the satisfaction was quickly drowned out by something else, anger. They only called me when they were desperate, when they had no other option. I told them I needed time to think and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain replayed every memory. The nights I stayed up doing inventory while Matt partied. The times I saved events from disaster by sheer willpower. The cold look on my father's face when he called me replaceable. And now they wanted me back. The next day my phone blew up. My mom texted long paragraphs about families sticking together. My dad emailed me spreadsheets showing their losses. Even Matt reached out. His first message to me in years saying, "Bro, we need you. I can't do this alone." I stared at that message for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't acknowledgement of what he'd done. It was just a plea for me to fix his mess. Kyle, my best friend, told me not to even consider it. They threw you out like trash, he said. Now they want you to come crawling back. Don't give them that power. But part of me still hesitated. Because this was my family, and because deep down, I still cared about the business I'd helped build. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I went back, I'd just be setting myself up to get burned all over again. So I drafted a simple reply and sent it to my parents. I'm not interested. And that's when the real storm began. I thought saying I'm not interested would be the end of it. A clean break. A chance to finally draw a boundary I should have drawn years ago. But if there is one thing my family is good at, it's guilt. The backlash started almost immediately. My mom called again the next morning, her voice heavy with tears. I don't understand how you can be so cold, she sobbed. Where are your parents? We gave you everything. The roof over your head, food on your plate. Opportunities you wouldn't have had without us. And now when we need you, you turn your back on us. I wanted to scream. Gave me everything they'd taken everything from me. My career, my stability, my sense of belonging. But instead, I just listened in silence. Until she hung up dramatically. Then came the texts from Matt. You're being selfish, brother. Think about mom and dad. They're not getting younger. Don't make them beg. Beg, the irony nearly made me choke. I begged for years for recognition, for support, for them to see me. They never did, but now that their golden child was drowning, suddenly my absence made me selfish. It didn't stop there, my aunt. My mom-ass sister called me out of the blue, her voice laced with judgment. "I don't know what has gotten into you," she scolded. "Family comes first. Always. You think I wanted to take care of my parents when they were sick? No, but I did it because it was the right thing to do. You're acting entitled." I asked her where she was when I was working 70-hour weeks for no pay, while my brother got treated like a prince. She went quiet for a moment before snapping, "That's different. This is about survival now." It seemed like every relative had something to say. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent me Facebook messages about how blood is thicker than water. One even implied I'd regret it when my parents passed away. The pressure was suffocating. Every ding of my phone made my chest tighten. Every voicemail was another emotional landmine. For a week straight, I barely slept. I replayed their words over and over in my head, selfish, cold, entitled. Kyle tried to keep me grounded. He reminded me that I had every right to say no. "They're not asking for help," he said bluntly. "They're demanding you clean up their mess after they treated you like garbage. That's not family, that's manipulation." Still, the guilt gnawed at me, because deep down, I couldn't turn off that part of me that cared. I'd grown up in that business. Every corner of that building held memories, good and bad. The kitchen where I learned to chop vegetables. The office where I planned my first solo event. The storage room where I used to hide during fights just to catch my breath. Letting it all crumble felt like watching a piece of myself die. One night I drove past the building just to see it. The parking lot was half empty. The paint on the company sign was peeling. A couple of workers I didn't recognize leaned against the wall on their smoke break, looking exhausted. It didn't look like the thriving place I once knew. It looked hollow, and that's when the doubt crept in. Maybe I was being cruel. Maybe despite everything I should help. Not for them, but for the company. For the legacy I once believed was mine. But then I remembered the way my father had looked at me the day he fired me cold. Detached. "You're replaceable," he'd said. If I went back now, wouldn't I just be proving him right? Didn't he have an answer? But I had a feeling the decision might be taken out of my hands sooner than I thought. Because 2 days later, I got an email from someone I never expected, an old client of the family business. And what they told me changed everything. The email came late at night, just as I was shutting down my laptop. The subject line read, "Urgent need to talk about your family as business." At first, I thought it was spam. But then I saw the name Eleanor Simmons. Eleanor wasn't just any client. She was one of the wealthiest women in our area and a longtime patron of my parents' company. Her family basically ran half the social scene in town. Weddings, galas, charity events if you landed the Simmons account. Other clients followed. I remembered working directly with her years ago and how much she respected my attention to detail. I clicked open the email. It started politely, but quickly turned into something sharper. "I don't know if you're aware of the current state of your parents' company, but I feel you should know. Their service has declined to an unacceptable level. My last 2 events were disasters. Late food, missing staff, incorrect orders. Guests noticed and word has gotten out. I've recommended them for years, but I can no longer do so. It's heartbreaking to see how far things have fallen since you left. Quite frankly, it's unrecognizable without you." My stomach dropped. I read the email 3 times, each word like a knife. On one hand, a petty, wounded part of me felt vindicated. This was the proof that I wasn't crazy, that I really had been holding everything together. On the other hand, seeing it spelled out by someone like Eleanor made me realize just how catastrophic the decline had been. If they lost her trust, they were doomed. The next day, I couldn't resist doing some digging. I reached out to a few old co-workers. One told me she quit after Matt double-booked events and then blamed staff when clients got furious. Another said paychecks had started bouncing. A third admitted the health inspector had flagged them for violations, something that never would be happened when I was there. The picture was clear. The business wasn't just struggling, it was collapsing. 2 days later, my mom called again. This time, she didn't even try to hide her desperation. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "We're drowning. The bank is threatening foreclosure. We can't keep staff. Clients are leaving in droves. If we don't fix this, we're going to lose everything." I asked, "And you think I can just walk in and magically fix years of neglect?" "You're the only one who can," she said quietly. Then my dad got on the line. And for the first time in my life, I heard him sound broken. "I was wrong," he admitted. "About you being replaceable. About Matt, I see it now. I should be he never let you go." The words hit me like a punch. I dreamed of hearing that admission for years, but instead of relief, I felt a cold anger. He was only saying it because he had no other choice. If the business were still thriving, would he be saying the same thing? Of course not after I hung up. I sat in my apartment for hours staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, all the nights I'd worked until my hands blistered. I thought about the years of silence, the loneliness, the bitterness. And now here, they were begging me to rescue them, like some kind of savior. Kyle told me to stay far away. They suck you dry again. He warned. Don't let them pull you back into that mess. You finally got out. But part of me couldn't ignore the temptation. Because Eleanor's email had planted an idea, I couldn't shake if I did step in. If I did turn things around, maybe I'd finally get the recognition I deserved. Maybe I could rebuild the business into something even better than before. But another, darker thought whispered in the back of my mind. Why save them at all? Why not let it collapse and build something of my own from the ashes? I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't done with this story. Not by a long shot. By the time my parents were calling daily, I had something I hadn't had when they first fired me: stability. The hotel I'd started working for had promoted me twice. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling anymore either. I had my own modest apartment, reliable income, and a reputation as the go-to person for events that had to be flawless. I was finally being valued for my skills instead of being treated like free labor. Clients loved me, my coworkers respected me. My boss even hinted that in a couple of years, I could be running my own department. For the first time, I was building something that was mine, not just an extension of my parents' dream. And then, out of nowhere, temptation came knocking. A corporate client I'd impressed at the hotel reached out privately, asking if I'd consider freelancing. They had a series of high-profile events coming up and wanted me to manage them personally. The pay more than I'd made in 6 months with my parents. I took the job, and then another, and then another. Within a year, I was juggling a full-time job and a small roster of freelance clients. People started recommending me by name, not just the hotel I worked for. That's when the thought began to creep in. Maybe I didn't need my parents' business anymore. Maybe I could build something on my own. Meanwhile, their calls grew more frantic. At first, they tried guilt. Then bargaining. We'll pay you a salary. We'll give you a partnership. My mom even dangled the phrase I'd even waiting my whole life to hear. You'd be next in line to take over. But by then, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like scraps being tossed from a sinking ship. A turning point came when I ran into an old vendor at a networking event. He pulled me aside, lowered his voice, and said, "You know your parents' company is on the market, right?" I blinked. "What do you mean on the market?" "They're trying to sell. Word is they're behind on loans and can't dig out. Bank ass breathing down their necks. They're desperate for a buyer." The words hit me like electricity. I felt a strange mix of emotions, shock, anger, and something I almost hated myself for. Excitement. Because in that moment, I realized something. I didn't have to go back as their savior. I didn't have to patch things up, just to watch Matt mess it all up again. I could buy it not alone. Of course. But with the connections ID built, the clients who trusted me, the reputation ID established, I could put together investors. I could take what was left of their business and turn it into something completely new. For years, I had dreamed of inheriting the company, of being chosen. Now the idea of taking it on my own terms felt like poetic justice. But it also scared me. Because stepping into that role meant more than business. It meant confronting my family, the people who had discarded me like trash, and showing them I didn't need their blessing to succeed. I didn't make any decisions that night, but when I went home and looked at the framed photo on my shelf, me smiling with the staff, after that massive wedding years ago, I felt something stir in my chest. Maybe this wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about reclaiming what should be been mine all along. Still, one question haunted me as I lay awake. If I did this, if I bought the company out from under my parents, would I be saving my legacy or destroying my family forever? By the time word got around that my parents were trying to sell the company, their calls had turned from desperate to downright relentless. It wasn't just please help anymore. It was bargaining, pleading, even begging. My mom left me a voicemail one night that sounded like she'd been crying for hours. "We'll give you everything you want. Title, salary, control. Just come home before it's too late." My dad's approach was different, more calculated, less emotional. He sent me spreadsheets showing just how far they'd fallen. Unpaid invoices stacked a mile high, loan balances that made my stomach twist, revenue down nearly 60% from the year ID left. In one email, he even admitted, "If things don't change in the next quarter, the bank will seize assets." And then there was Matt. He texted me constantly, his messages, swinging wildly between anger and desperation. "Don't be a jerk. This is your family. Do you want mom and dad to lose the house? Is that what you want? Okay, I messed up, but you can fix it. You're always the fixer. Please, bro. I can't handle this anymore." Every time I read one, I felt that old resentment boiling in my chest, because that was the truth. Wasn't he and I had always been the fixer, the one who caught the dropped balls, cleaned up the messes, stayed late to make sure things ran smoothly. Matt never had to learn responsibility because everyone assumed I'd pick up the slack. But not anymore. I told Kyle what the vendor had said about the business being up for sale. His reaction was immediate. "You have to buy it," I laughed. But wasn't he joking? "Think about it," he pressed. "You know that business better than anyone. You already have connections. You could rebuild it, make it yours. Why let some stranger swoop in and profit off everything you worked for?" The more I thought about it, the less crazy it sounded. So I started quietly testing the waters. I called a few of the freelance clients I'd built relationships with, asked hypothetically if they'd support me in a new venture. Every single one said yes. One even offered to introduce me to an investor. Within weeks, I had meetings lined up. Real discussions with people who had money to put into a venture like mine. People who believed in me, not in the family business. Meanwhile, the pressure from my family only intensified. My aunt called again, this time more furious than before. "How dare you let your parents suffer like this? They gave you everything, and you're just sitting back watching them fail." I snapped. "No, they didn't. He give me everything. They took everything. They took my loyalty, my hard work, my future, and when I needed them. Where were they?" She sputtered something about forgiveness and family, but I hung up before she could finish. That night, I stared at my notes from the investor meetings, pit growing in my stomach. Because the truth was becoming clearer every day. This wasn't just about saving a business anymore. This was about reclaiming power. And the closer I got to pulling it off, the more I realized that if I went through with it, there would be no going back. My parents wouldn't see it as me saving them. They'd see it as betrayal. But deep down, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe they deserved it. The first time I saw an actual buyout contract with my name on it, I had to sit down. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. An investor group I'd been talking to put together a real proposal. They'd back me financially. I'd take over operations, and in exchange, we'd restructure the company under a new brand. They'd provide capital, but I'd be the face and the backbone. For years, I'd dreamed of inheriting the family business. Now I had the chance to own it outright, not as a gift, but as something I fought for. The catch, I'd have to make the first move. The investors were clear the bank wouldn't. Wait forever if I wanted in. I had to get my parents to agree to sell before someone else swooped in. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my dad when he picked up. His voice sounded strained, like he'd aged 10 years in 3 sun. He said, "Tell me you've reconsidered." "I have," I replied. "But not the way you think." I told him straight. I was interested in taking over the company, but not as an employee, not as a silent partner, and not as their safety net. I wanted full control. A buyout. They'd be paid out of the deal, but once it went through, the business would be mine to run as I saw fit. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then he exhaled slowly and said, "You want to take our business away from us?" "No," I corrected. "I want to save what's left of it." "You can't do it." "Matt can't do it, you've proven that." "But I can, and if you don't sell to me, you'll lose it all to the bank anyway." I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. My mom got on the line, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to us? We're your parents. How could you do this to me?" I snapped before I could stop myself. "You fired me. You left me with nothing. And now you expect me to come back and work for you, like nothing happened? No. The only way this works is if I'm in charge. The next day, Matt showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen him in person since the day I left the company. He looked rough. Dark circles under his eyes, hair messy like he hadn't slept in weeks. "You can't do this," he said the second I opened the door. "You can't just take everything. This is supposed to be mine." I almost laughed. "Yours? You couldn't even handle payroll. You drove half the staff away. You're the reason it's in shambles." His face twisted, and for a second, I thought he might actually hit me. But then his shoulders slumped, and he muttered, "If you do this, you will destroy Mom and Dad." "No," I said evenly. "I'll destroy their illusion. They chose you. They gambled the business on you, and they lost." "That's not on me," he stormed out, slamming the door so hard my neighbor came out to see what happened. That night, I got an email from my dad. Short-clipped. "No emotion if you really want to go through with this. You'd better come prepared. We'll hear your offer. It wasn't acceptance." Not yet, but it wasn't a rejection either. For the first time in years, the power was in my hands. And for the first time in his life, Matt knew he wasn't the golden child anymore. That walking into that conference room felt surreal. On one side sat my parents, worn down, exhausted, but still clinging to the last scraps of pride. On the other side were the investors backing me, their sharp suits and colder eyes making it obvious they weren't here for sentiment. And then there was Matt slouched in his chair, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally stolen his birthright. The tension was thick enough to choke on. My dad opened with his usual bravado. "If you think you can swoop in and lowball us, think again. This company is our life as work." I didn't teeth flinch. "Your life as work is bleeding money. I'm not here to insult you. I'm here to give you a way out before the bank takes everything. You know the numbers as well as I do." The lead investor slid a document across the table. "Here is the offer. It's generous considering the state of things. You walk away with a payout that gets restructured. But control shifts entirely to us and our operating partner." All eyes landed on me. My mom-ass face crumpled. "You mean to him?" Mad exploded. "This is bullshit. You can't just hand it to him." "He didn't earn it." I turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "Didn't he earn it? One spent a decade keeping this place alive. While you played boss. I earned every inch of this." He shoved his chair back, muttering under his breath. But no one moved to stop him. For the first time, even my parents weren't defending him. The negotiations dragged for hours. My parents tried to push back, asking for higher payouts, for partial control, for some kind of advisory role. The investors shut each demand down with the kind of ruthless logic only money people can deliver. "You're insolvent. You're out of leverage. Take the deal or lose everything." By the end, my parents were cornered. My mom sat in silence, tears streaking her cheeks, while my dad stared at the contract like it was a death sentence. Finally, he picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed, then slid it to my mom. She hesitated, whispered, "I can't believe we're doing this," and then signed too. When the papers came to me, I didn't hesitate. I wrote my name clean and bold, the way you do when you know you're stepping into something irreversible. That was the moment the company stopped being theirs and became mine. The meeting ended in silence. My parents left without looking at me. Matt stormed out ahead of them, his face twisted in fury. The investors congratulated me, but I barely heard them, because all I could think about was the irony. AITA once begged my parents to see my worth. They never did. And now they had no choice but to hand me everything. But here is the thing, victory didn't feel sweet. Not yet. Because winning, this meant I didn't just take control of a business. I took away their legacy, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever stop paying the price for that. The first week after the takeover was surreal. The office was eerily quiet, the walls echoing memories of years I had spent running the place. But now, for the first time, I was in charge. I started making immediate changes. Staff who had stayed loyal to me were reinstated. Vendors who had been ignored for months were called back. I reorganized scheduling, restructured debt, and contacted clients who had fled to competitors. Slowly, the company began to breathe again. At first, I told myself it was just business. But deep down, I knew this was personal. Every decision I made was a reminder of the years I had sacrificed, of the betrayal I'd endured, of the family who had chosen someone else over me. I rebuilt not just a company, but my own legacy. Meanwhile, the family fallout was intense. Matt refused to speak to me. My parents didn't call, didn't visit, didn't even ask how the company was doing under my leadership. Word spread quickly through relatives and old family friends, and I became the bad kid in their eyes, the one who took the business, ruined the family dynamic, and showed no mercy. Social media was brutal. Some applauded me for taking control and fixing a failing company. Others accused me of greed, cruelty, and revenge. Even close friends had differing opinions. Kyle told me I'd done the right thing, but others whispered that I could have handled it with more compassion. The hardest part, though, was my own reflection. I had always been the fixer, the protector of a company that was never fully mine. Now I owned it, but at what cost? I hadn't saved my parents. I hadn't repaired my brother. And even though I knew they had made their choices, a nagging question haunted me. Had I gone too far? One evening, as I walked through the renovated office, I found the old framed photo of me with the staff after that massive wedding years ago. I held it in my hands, and I realized something. I hadn't destroyed the company. I had preserved what truly mattered: the work I loved, the clients I respected, and the team who had trusted me. I posted an update on Reddit that night, not as a boast, but as a question. I dedicated over a decade of my life to my parents' business. They fired me, left me with nothing, and chose my brother over me. Now I've taken over the business after it was falling apart, and the family thinks I'm cruel. AITA for doing what I had to do to reclaim what I built. Even as I typed it, I wrestled with the truth. In their eyes, I probably was the asshole. But in mine, I was finally free. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had made the choice that was right. Not for them, not for my brother, but for me.